history event a few weeks ago, and a friend of mine was down to do the speech at the end of the evening at 11 o'clock. It was a bit of a weird arrangement, but he said, "Oh, I'm really hating doing this." And this other guy said, "Well, I'll set the fire alarm off if you want." Anyway, guess what happened? The fire alarm did go off, and it was a real fire alarm just before he was about to speak. So I'm sure. Well, we're
tempting fate, aren't we?
Is anyone here from Curtleys? Haven't got one? No, you'll smell the For those of you that haven't been to the club before, well, a very special welcome. Thanks for coming along. We're very proud of the fact it's the oldest surviving socialist club in Yorkshire. I think Bolton Socialist Club is the edge on us in terms of the north of England. That's been going a little bit longer than us, but we were formed in 1892, so pretty long record of supporting progressive causes with the Red and Green Club, and that gives a clue as to our politics. It's not just the colour of the door, we are socialist Greens. We're a non-aligned progressive social club. If you aren't already members, do please join. There's forms behind the bar. Dellies are a membership comrade, coordinator. Hi, there's a few seats around. So that's about it. Oh, there is a very good history of the club which I can recommend, which my friend Alan over here wrote most of. Politics, Culture and Community, the Red and the Green Club in Milnsbridge. I'm not sure how much we're selling it for. It's very cheap, at least about £2 behind the bar. So it's a really fascinating history of the club. And just one more thing to say about here, actually. We don't own this building. We're all volunteers. We're trying to raise enough money to buy the building, and so we're doing quite well with that from individual contributions, and the TSSA Rail Union has offered us 40,000 to help, but we've still got quite a long way to go, so we desperately need members to help swell the ranks. They also get involved. We're a pretty good friendly bunch, and there's lots of things that people can do to get involved. So again, have a word with Nell or anyone behind the bar, and they'll tell you how you can get involved. So, welcome to Neal, who's come from London via Aberdeen, which is an interesting route. And he's going to talk to us about how to build a good society, but plenty of time for discussion and debate. So,
thanks very much, Paul. Trust a person from an organisation called Compass to come to Huddersfield via Aberdeen. It's absolutely delightful to be here. I've been trying to organise this with Paul for some time. I'm a big fan of Paul and all the work he does on this kind of stuff and railways and thinking about regionalism and all that. So I was delighted to find an opportunity to finally come up and find out about the Red Green Club and Huddersfield. And it's great to be here. I'm going to sort of do something I haven't done before, which is sort of talk a little bit about, get to the sort of notion of what a good society is and the politics and all that, a bit through my life in and around the Labour Party. And I thought about doing that. We had a conversation earlier with some other people who are part of the Hannah Mitchell Foundation and some of the people involved in the Red Green Club. We had a chat in town in a very interesting Moroccan bar above another bar in town, which was delightful. We were sort of asking the question about why people got involved in politics, where did they come from, and what motivated them. People had different reasons. And so I got involved in the Labour. I joined the Labour Party when I was about 17 in 1979, just as a sort of youngish kind of boy, watching Mrs. Thatcher on the television, not really understanding much of it, and watching Jim Callaghan and not understanding much of it, but just sort of instinctively knowing which side I was on. And I mean, not many people joined the Labour Party in 1979. I don't guess, but I was one of them. I came from an affluent working class family in South London. My mum works in a shoe shop, which is really hard work. Working in a shoe shop is really tough. My dad was a father of a chapel on Fleet Street for the Daily Express. I actually got him to join. Me and my sister joined the Labour Party at the same time. We got him to join. He was a trade unionist first and always saw political change happening through trade unions and not through political parties, but we persuaded him to join. And I suppose joining the Labour Party then and being part of it in that time, those years ago, what is that, 35 years ago or something? I'm not good at maths and I'm not very good at speaking, but about 35 years of time. I suppose you thought you were joining up to something. I think even then, they had a notion that kind of history was on its side. that what you had to do was kind of join the party, knock on doors, deliver leaflets, elect a politician, elect enough politicians of the right kind of stripe, get them into government, and they would begin to usher in socialism for us. A kind of gradual accretion, a kind of slow movement towards something better. That better thing was never really very well defined. We didn't really know where we were going. We knew what we liked when we saw it, and we knew what we didn't like when we saw it, and we thought that, you know, over time, 1945, 1964, 66, 74, that if you kept on going, then eventually you'd get to the good society, to a kind of socialist world. And we didn't question that much. We just kept on knocking on the doors and delivering the leaflets and hoping for the right people to step in and begin to deliver stuff. And well, I think it was about that time that a bit later that Osborne wrote his treatise, The Forward March of Labour Halted. But I think before that time that I joined the Labour Party, that notion had really, in a sense, begun to unwind. That the possibility of that happening, even if it actually ever existed really, had begun to unwind for all sorts of reasons. And I think the bulk of the people in the Labour Party, now I'm still a member of the Labour Party, I don't know how many people here are, some will be, some won't be, some will be Greens and, you know, not aligned as Paul was saying. But that notion that what we want to do is recreate that fantastic, marvellous 1945 moment when we created the NHS and we created the welfare state and we moved towards full employment, we did wonderful things. That somehow if we just kept trying we could do that again and it would all happen again. That's been unwinding for a long time, and it's certainly been unwinding from the time that I've been a member of the Labour Party. In my life, in and around the Labour Party as an activist, running local parties and thinking about stuff and being a junior bag carrier to, you know, very senior people in the Labour Party and a cog in the wheel. All of my life has been thinking about where does power come from? Where does change come from? How do you begin to transform things and make something like a good society? And we'll maybe talk a bit about what that is. How do you make that happen? And is it just that way of believing that one single party with the right people can get into control of the state and pull the levers and make things happen and do things for people? And I've been kind of questioning that and thinking about that all my political life. And I'm not sure that that's going to work. I don't think it's going to work. Actually, I'm certain it's not going to work, to be honest. I won't caveat it. You know, I think 1945 was a tremendous moment, but it was a moment of its time. It was a moment when, you know, men came home from the war, and women had this experience of being involved in the economy, collectivist experience, memories of the depression, of mass unemployment. The huge we forget about this now. The huge spectre of the Soviet Union, right, was a massive force in politics in 1945 because the capitalists didn't want that to happen here. They could see it happen somewhere else, and they didn't want it to happen here. So they were more willing to give stuff away to the workers, like the welfare state and social security and the NHS and all of that kind of stuff. So you had this moment in history where a strong working class movement with very strong identity, the war experience, the pre-war experience, the Soviet Union, all made something happen in 1945 for particular contextual reasons. And then imagining that would then reproduce itself again without the Soviet Union, without the strong working class, without the memories of the war or the pre-war era. Why do we think it's going to happen again? Why do we think something like, you know, my party, the Labour Party, is going to be powerful again without all of those things? Because politics isn't about electing a person or a series of people to the top positions. I mean, actually, I think that, you know, it wasn't about Attlee or Morrison or Bevan or whatever in 45. They were just kind of, they happened to be surfers on a wave. What mattered was there was this huge kind of national yearning for something better, for something more. It was the wave that mattered. And that was an intellectual wave, it was an organisational wave, it was cultural, that had been brewing for a long time. And they surfed it and they did their good. And that moment has come and gone, and we're not going to create it. And if we're not going to create it like that again, how are we going to create it? And this is where I guess I was saying to people earlier that in a sense I always turn back to Dickens and A Tale of Two Cities. I think today, now, it's the best of times and it's the worst of times. It's the worst of times because that dream of things happening in that way is dissipated, is gone. I think palpably. There is a poll out tonight that puts, Labour on 29% and the Conservatives on 30%. Less than 60% of the vote between them on a turnout at the next election of 55, 60%. That gives you absolutely no legitimacy whatsoever. 1951, 98% of the people voted for one of the two big parties because that was the way things were there. Two big classes, two choices, two tribes went to war. That's the way it was, but that's just broken down and fractured. And things are changing so dramatically. So, politics is moving on, is changing, and instead of having the Soviet Union, which forced all sorts of concessions out of the capitalists, instead of an industrial, solid working class that gave the movement its strength, instead of memories of the war, what do you have? You have globalisation, corporations now striding the planet, deciding where they're going to invest, playing one country off against each other in terms of flexible labour markets, in terms of taxation, blackmailing nations about what they can do in terms of trying to look after their people or look after the planet. On the one hand, and on the other, you have a process of individualisation and consumerisation. That the good society is the bigger and bigger plasma television screen, and how big can that be? And what does that mean to notions of social solidarity and our commitment to each other when the good life and the good society is being on the treadmill of turbo consumerism, when enough is never enough, when you compete with each other for the car you've got and the house you've got and the holidays you go on and the things you wear, etc. What does that do to break up any notion of building a much more collective and solid sense of what the good society and the good life is? And then that kicks in that everything's done in the name of, obviously, the banks and neoliberalism and financial capitalism, and we get to 2008 and the crash and austerity, and a moment that should have been right for the left isn't right for the left because we don't know how to do politics in a world where things have become fragmented and individualised and aren't like they are in the past. So instead of it being a moment for the left, it became a further entrenchment for the right, for them to eat in even more, and not just feed off of consumerisation out of house bubbles or internet bubbles, but to feed off the public sector itself and use the public's money to pay for all of their excesses. I mean, an amazing ability of neoliberalism and capitalism to change the terms of debate in a way that suits itself. Quite incredible. And there we have a Labour Party that's kind of, umming and ahhing around austerity light, and then following on kind of issues of, immigration, benefits and those kinds of things, and not championing a different kind of politics because its whole culture, I think, and its whole way of being is still far too rooted in 1945 style politics when neoliberalism is setting the agenda and pushing things forward in a very, very different way. So that's the bad news. The good news, why could it be the best of times? Why could it be the best of times? Because the Labour movement, the Labour Party, came out of a particular moment originally. It came out of a moment of people organising and doing things for themselves. It came out of the spirit of cooperativism, it came out of the spirit of trade unions, of friendly societies, of left-wing book clubs, of clarion cycle clubs, of all sorts of ways in which people came together and made things happen, the mutuals, all of that kind of stuff, which brought people together and made them stronger by coming together. And those things did their things in those ways, given the culture, the way things were produced, the way things were done. And now things are done in a different way, but they're bringing people together in different ways. I don't want to be and sound like, and you can accuse me of this and I'll try and defend it, of some kind of economic or technological determinist. But I think we are going through a revolution in the way that we operate, and therefore the way that we think and do. The kind of shift towards a digital network society where social media and the internet becomes the predominant form of our culture, the predominant way in which we understand ourselves and we talk to each other and we relate to each other. It's not the only thing we do. We're just at the cusp of it, I think. But we are beginning to operate and think in a way which is much more networked, much more connected, much more joined up, that we can know, all of us, because of these things, we can know anything, anywhere. We can get in touch with anyone, anywhere. And there's downsides to that, in that Google or Amazon, or even elements of turbo consumerism, they know what you want before you know what you want, because they've watched everything that you've looked at and understand everything about you. They can survey you. But it gives us the capability to form new types of collectivism, to join up, to act, to think, to organise globally, nationally, locally. We can do far more than we've ever done. We can accelerate the process in which people come together and take control of their lives. And the big thing to me, the big difference, is that 1945 was a moment when essentially kind of elitist and hierarchical institutions, well-meaning, wanting to do the good things, did things to people and for people. We were cogs in the wheel of big command and control, top-down organisations, because that was the way things were done then. That's the way the organisations, governments, armies, political parties, everything was formed in that fashion, because that was the fashion of the day. And we didn't have much of a voice or much of a say in that. The word was, they were very paternalistic. We were subjects of what was given to us. And the thing about today, the big difference for me today, and this is where my sense of hope comes from, is that in a network society, in a social media society, in an internet society, that the planes are flatter, that you can talk to each other one-to-one, many-to-many, you can connect with each other. It's not someone necessarily talking down to you, telling you what to do, telling you what your place is. So I don't think really, however well-meaning those 1945 institutions and creations were, I don't think they were ever going to usher in a good society, because they were always about doing things to people, for people, and not with people, and not by people. See, I think the good society is one that we create ourselves. We don't create it individually, really, because there's not much you can do as an individual. You can go and buy some stuff. But actually, you create a good society by operating collectively with other people. And that was never the case, really, in 1945. I think it was too paternalistic, it was too top-down. I'm not saying it didn't do good things, it did. But we were never going to build a good society as subjects. Today, we can start creating things ourselves, and my word, are we doing it. Just picking up some conversations tonight that Barry was telling me about, an event in Leeds at the weekend that 800 people went to. Exactly thinking about kind of good society issues, largely outside of the mainstream party political orbit. The things that you know about, like 38 Degrees, Transition Towns, London Citizens, all sorts of organisations springing up all over the place. Talk to Graham here tonight, who's just started his own local renewable energy scheme for people, got loads of other people signed up, because you can do things now really easily and really quickly. We can form new solidarities and new ways of collecting people together to do things, and I think that's really interesting. And I think that's the left has always done well when it has a narrative, a story, a connection to modernity, to say that we understand the future better than the capitalists. And that's what we did in 1945. That's a bit what, in his own way, Wilson did in '64 with the white hot heated technology. In its own eventually distorted way, that's what Blair did in '97. And that's what I think we can do now. We can have a story about the future, a way of reclaiming modernity, a way of saying that the world can come our way, that these networks, these digital networks, can bring people together online and offline, can join them up. On these flatter planes, you have to treat people in a more egalitarian and democratic way. You can't talk down to them. They will have a voice and they will have a say. They will form multiple identities on Facebook. They will join up, they will do things. They will find their own sense of purpose and their own identity. And that gives us an opportunity, I think, to do the political job of joining that up, scaling that up, and making a different kind of political project. In some instances, it's just a kind of back to the future. It's just the same stuff as we did in the past when we were mutuals and we were cooperators and we were friendly societies. It's the same thing, but just doing it in our time and our place with the technology and the culture which is available to us today. So I'm optimistic in a sense. There's a fine line between optimism and wishful thinking, I understand that. But actually we never progress. We never really move on unless we have a story of hope, a belief that the future can be better than the past. And I profoundly, fundamentally believe that, because I believe in people's capacity. I believe in their ability to do stuff. I believe in their compassion. I believe in their love. I believe in their humanity, that we can be better than this. And that maybe now we could start finding ways of operating and doing and being, which allows all of the beautiful things that we have in us to come out, and for us to share it and for us to express it. The radical Welsh cultural theorist Raymond Williams said the test of a true radical is to make hope possible rather than despair convincing. I think our job is to make hope possible in politics. In the darkest of times, I think we're at the cusp of something which is really, really interesting. The possibility that we can unite the means and ends of politics. That the way in which the good society we want to create, the world in which we make ourselves and make it collectively, the way we do that is working together collectively. Not doing it through institutions that tell us what to do and tell us our place, but ones we create, we build. And that way, that unification of means and ends is the thing that gives me hope. And I think the moment is ripe for a new kind of politics, exactly the same old values, but a different form of politics and different ways of doing things, which I think is going to give us all sorts of challenges about how we operate, how pluralist we are, how open we are to red-green alliances. We're going to have to do it in a different way for the same purposes. But I can see for maybe the first time in my life since I joined the Labour Party in 1979, I have real hope that a good society isn't just a dream, but you can see a route map towards it. I'm really glad I'm here to talk more about that with you tonight. Thank you.